Welcome to the Point. As we continue our journey, trying to get our minds around and actually our hearts around all that's going on in this election cycle and that is coming fast upon us, it's important that we as Christians understand politics, the what and the why of politics. The word politics can be a lightning rod in a lot of ways. The word politics comes from the root word polis, simply meaning city. Politics is about ordering the affairs of a people, a neighborhood, a city, even extending to a nation. Technically, politics is the process by which a community is ordered. Now we know that politics has gained a little bit of a soiled understanding and definition and association, but it still does not change the reality of the need for it. And it's actually a part of God's design for life. So we ask the question, should we? Should we as believers get involved and engaged in government and the political process? Some circles seem to assume that political involvement is inappropriate, or at least a distraction for God's people. Adherents of this view suggest that Christians should exclusively focus on evangelism and discipleship. I think it's been a pretty effective strategy for Satan, and it's affected God's people to where they've been alienated from government and the participation in government. He's deceived many into believing that involvement in government or politics is inappropriate and even unspiritual. Let them teach Bible stories, let them share the gospel, let them do church activities, but don't let them know they're His government here on earth, Christ's governmental representatives. And also, keep them from involving themselves in any and all government processes. In so doing, Satan has succeeded in rendering God's government on the earth ineffective and has mitigated the salt and light effect of God's kingdom. To be truly committed to the gospel, discipleship, and equipping of the saints, it encompasses all of life. This includes marriage, it includes family, it includes parenting, it includes the workplace or education, finances, and yes, it also includes government. The biblical worldview has much to say about civic responsibility, about our government, about politics as God's ecclesia, or His church. We'll explain the term ecclesia in another session, but right now, just to understand that as God's people, we have a responsibility of representing God's government here on earth, God's kingdom. So let's think about it. Entire groups of people were either cursed or blessed based on the actions of government leaders. More suffering on earth has occurred because of government leaders' actions than for any other reason. Millions of people have been killed and persecuted because of government leaders. Poverty has overtaken nations, again because of government leaders. Over 60 million babies in America have been murdered since 1973 because of government actions and, yes, government leaders. We need to understand that government is God's idea. In fact, God is government. In Isaiah 33:22, God says, "For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, and the Lord is our king." God is the ultimate government in the universe. He's identified as Lord almost 8,000 times in the Scriptures, and rightfully so, since He is the creator God of all that exists in this world. One of His first acts at creation was to delegate to the man whom He created to exercise government on the earth on His behalf. Genesis 1:28 in the New Living Translation reads, "Then God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it.'" God delegated to mankind oversight for the dignity of humanity created in His image. We read this to be expressed in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6. It reads, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in His own image." It's an amazing verse to let us know that God has given to humanity the responsibility of oversight to the dignity of humanity. In Psalm 115, verse 16, the psalmist writes, "The highest heavens belong to the Lord, but He's given the earth to man." And then finally, we read in Romans chapter 13 and verse 1, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." The authorities that exist have been established by God. So it's very clear that government is part of God's design and a part of God's activity. Humanity is responsible for governing the affairs and the well-being of those that are on earth. Government is God's idea, and Christians should engage with it in a way consistent with God's God-ordained purposes. So when we think about government and its engagement and our responsibility as Christians to government, we have to make the conclusion, since government is of God, it is foolish to assume that Christ's followers are to leave the politics, the ordering of the affairs of our communities, our cities, our counties, our states, and our nation to those who are not God-fearers. Are we to expect righteous and godly legislation and governance from those who are unrighteous and ungodly? The function of government is to restrain evil and to maintain and uphold what is good for the sanctity of life, according to Romans chapter 13, verses 3 and 4. In Romans 13, Paul also describes the governing authorities as servants of God and says they're responsible for administering civil justice. Since governing authorities are servants of God, shouldn't God's people be engaged with the government and its politics and its establishing of those who represent us in the government? Well, until next time, I want to encourage you to continue considering your responsibility, for us to consider our responsibility to be engaged in God's government, God's politics here on earth. God bless, and we'll see you next time.